Hey mamas, this is Playfully Faithful Parenting, and I'm your host, Joy Wendling. I'm a seminary grad and children's and family minister turned stay-at-home mom to my 5 girls. Spiritual parenting is my calling, and it's my passion to help other mamas disciple their kids using the power of play and their own authentic daily walk with Christ. If you're a mama who wants to introduce your kids to Jesus and watch as the Holy Spirit transforms their lives, this is the place for you. I'm so glad you're here. So let's dive in and see how we can partner with God today. Hey mamas, welcome to Playfully Faithful Parenting. I'm your host Joy, and I am really excited about today's episode. I just learned about this topic, where I got this topic from a couple of weeks ago, and I found it so fascinating. So we are in a series talking about some basic play for kids. So this week we're talking blocks. We've talked about risky play. We've talked about loose parts play. We're going to talk about chalk play. Just kind of some basic play things. And the first week of the series, we talked about scaffolding, which is going to be the best tool for you to help nurture your kids' faith. Whether you're playing, having dinner, having conversations in the car, whatever, please go back and check out the episode about scaffolding. It is the best tool for you to nurture your children's faith. One other thing that I think is so important for us as we parent our kids, as we discipline our kids, as we disciple our kids and nurture their faith, is for us to understand child development, even the basics of how God created our kids to learn and grow, and to accept God's wisdom in that, not expect our kids to be somewhere or be pushing them to do something, be something, think something that they're not yet capable of. Or if maybe they're kind of sometimes capable of it. I know I, even as a full-grown person, am not always capable of the same things. Some days I can handle noise or distraction more so than other days. Some days I can listen to the same song on repeat over and over, and other days I can't. Our capability to do something one time does not mean we're going to be perfect at it. And so as we remember that and can give our kids grace in that and adjust our expectations, which is going to increase our patience, our kindness, our mercy, our grace with our kids. We're going to be modeling God better to our kids in those moments, and we are going to be nurturing our kids' faith by showing them what His unconditional love looks like and by honoring God's design for their development. I believe all of that plays into the way our kids are going to experience faith and love, abundant life, and we have such an important role in that. So today we are going to be talking about block play. And we've talked about in each of the episodes of this series, Luke 2:52, and Jesus grew in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. He grew cognitively, he grew physically, he grew spiritually and emotionally. And our kids are always doing the same thing. Child development is God designed. It is purposeful and intentional. And we so often try to rush our kids through it. So one of the things we're going to talk about today are the 7 stages with kind of a pre-stage, the 7 stages of block play. Our kids have different ways of playing with blocks depending on their age and their development. I find that so interesting, and it follows a pattern, which means our God of order intentionally designed our kids to respond to this kind of play in an intentional way. He designed it this way. And that doesn't mean that every kid follows this exactly the same way. Some of this, especially later stages, can overlap. And if kids are introduced to blocks later in childhood, they may kind of skip over some stages or go through them very quickly. If a child is just introduced to blocks at 4 or 5, they are probably not going to go through the baby stage 0 kind of pre-stage of mouthing blocks and experiencing them with all of their senses in the same way a baby would be if a baby is introduced to blocks. So there is some fluidity, some flexibility within these stages, but typically children follow these through a progression. And I just think that when we acknowledge this and honor God's design, our expectations of our kids can be appropriate, which increases our grace and patience with our kids and models God to them so much more than when we try to rush our kids and we have these inappropriate expectations for our kids and their behavior, whether it be playing or just wherever. We often have these inappropriate expectations of our kids, and that is what stresses us out so often, right? Okay, so let's talk about these stages of block play. I just learned about this last month. I joined, it's called storiesofplay.com. She has a membership called the Authentic Learning Encounter or something like that. And it is all about, she teaches on play, and she is she's in Australia, so I think they call it a certified teacher, something like that. But she has a degree in early childhood education, and she understands development. And so she comes at play from a much more academic standpoint. I do believe, just from some of the things that I've heard her say in some of her videos, that she is a Christian. But her material is strictly academic. It's about children learning through play and math skills, reading skills, lots of creativity, resilience, these kinds of things. So I, like always, love what the things I learn and then translating them to how we can use those things to nurture our kids' faith. So let's look at these 7 stages of block play. And this is not something that she has developed. I've read about it since then on many, many websites and blogs and different resources. But I did originally learn about it through her. Her name is Jules. I can't think of her last name, but storiesofplay.com. And her group only opens up a few times a year, so it's not open right now. But I'm going to pass on some goodies. So today, stage 0, we already talked about that. This kind of pre-stage of babies discovering blocks. Okay, so they're just kind of acknowledging that they're there and understanding them. Then the true stage 1, kids, this is under 2, typically can start to carry blocks around, use them, but not necessarily stacking, maybe making piles, knocking down people's towers, passing blocks around, that kind of thing. Just kind of getting accustomed with blocks. That is under stage 2. I have read in a different place that about 15 months, some kids can stack 2 blocks, and at about 18 months, stack 3 blocks. And then stage 2 starts between 2 and 3 years old. And this is where they start kind of being able to stack a few more blocks, maybe up to 6 or 7. But at this age, kids also start to stack blocks horizontally in kind of straight lines or curved lines, as well as in the typical kind of towers. They may become a little repetitive and do patterns, but it's not going to be an elaborate pattern yet. Then at about 3-ish years old, the next stage, which is stage 3, they start making bridges and start balancing blocks. So if you have young kids who like to play with blocks, watch them and see where they are. And just kind of pay attention, or just think back to if your kids were big block players, what did they do at different ages? It's really, really fascinating, I think. Then stage 4 is they start building enclosures, houses. My 4-year-old and 3-year-old, they like to build garages, or taking animals and making like a little zoo, like little cages for each of the animals. So enclosures is the next stage. Then at stage 5, this is between 3 and 4. What they build becomes more complex and intentional, and they have kind of more stories to it, and they can use more intricate patterns and more balance involved. So that's between 3 and 4. And remember that sometimes these stages can overlap. So they could start building enclosures with patterns and with symmetry. And so recognizing colors, right? And so my 4-year-old also, she likes to have very particular colors. And when she's building, she wants, 2 yellows and 2 oranges and that kind of thing. So they're becoming more intentional. Then stage 6 is called early representation. This is the start of some symbolic play. So where their zoo becomes not just boxes with an animal in each one, but maybe now they have a path and they use more types of blocks, and maybe there's a pool, and maybe there's the snack shop at there, and there's the penguin exhibit is a little fancier, and it's not just squares or rectangles, enclosures for each of the animals, but it becomes a little bit more elaborate, and they might start to kind of plan things out a little bit. And then 5 and up is stage 7. And this is more advanced representation. So it's just taking that stage 6 of early representation and digging in even more elaborate. Kids might start to work together, and they would say, let's all build a zoo. And they would plan out what they're going to do. And they might bring lots of other toys in. Around stage 5, adding other loose parts into block play can be really helpful and help your kids with creativity and more storytelling. And then, but by stage 7, they can name things, or maybe they're building a dinosaur and it has moved beyond just enclosures, or this is a neighborhood or a store, but they might build some kind of animal out of blocks, or a castle, and this is the moat, and just it gets more and more elaborate, and they can start naming things and identifying them, intentionally representing things and places and stories of their own lives in there. And so it is just exciting. And then as kids get older, they may choose to kind of step away from blocks and use other tools and medium to represent their clay markers as they become more skilled. But they may also go back and start just adding to their block play, depending on them and their personality and what they enjoy. I've also found that sometimes my kids will get tired of blocks if I have them out for too long, and then they need something new, something fresh. And once they've played with something else for a couple of weeks, bringing the blocks back out, whether it's like magnetile blocks or the blocks. If you're in the Facebook group, I've posted a couple of pictures this past week during the loose play. We've got some fun loose parts play blocks sets that my kids love and have been playing with a lot, especially this week. And other kinds of just wooden blocks that go with train sets. And so there is just such a wide variety in blocks, and then so much that you can add to it. Blocks are really great for being able to have out while you're telling stories from the Bible, or adding to the stories that you've already told, coming together and playing together while you talk about, maybe the Bible story that you read the night before or something you learned in church. But it is a great way to be able to talk and chat and ask a lot of questions while doing something creative and with your hands. So when we are honoring God's design of kids' block play, we're not going to try to build some elaborate thing with a 2-year-old, because what are they going to do? Smash it. They're going to knock it over, and they're going to think it's hilarious because that's the way God designed them. Okay? They do not yet understand that it hurts sister's feelings when she knocks down her tower. So we can help everybody. We can use that as a beautiful opportunity to make things right, to acknowledge that we hurt people, that we have an impact on their feelings. But we can also, by acknowledging where they are at in their block play, we can then scaffold that and help them to maybe take the next step simply by starting with modeling. And so that is one of the most important things that we do in our faith and in our home lives as we teach our kids. So playing with blocks with your kids, and just maybe if you do something super elaborate and they're just stacking, they're going to be intimidated and be like, ugh, I can't do that. I'm just going to watch mommy, and I'm going to let mommy build the blocks for me. But if your child is stacking and you start bridging, which is the next step, then your kid might say, oh, I wonder if I can do that. And they might try it. And if they can't, that's okay. And then you watch that, you interact with that, you encourage what they can do. But if it is frustrating them that you can make a bridge and they can't, then maybe you go back to just stacking, or maybe you work together. And just by really paying attention to where your kid is and honoring God's design will model Christ to your child. And then enter in to block play with them. That is what Jesus did with us. He entered into the world with us and went through. He is God, and he stepped down to become a baby and to grow physically and emotionally and spiritually and cognitively and socially. He grew in all of those ways. So we can pay attention to where our kids are at and enter into that space and gently scaffold and encourage them where they are, and then help them take the next step. If you want to learn more about this and what it looks like and how we can practically add faith into those conversations while you're playing with blocks, I would love to talk with you. If you want to learn more about discipling your kids and nurturing their faith through discipline, or when your frustration is running out, oh, Mama, I want to help. I have found so much grace and truth for my own life that I am trying desperately to pass on to my kids. And I mess up, but knowing I have the framework, that I have people to help me and hold me accountable, makes all the difference. I would love to be that person for you and walk you through the Connected Families framework as a certified coach. I have trained to do that. So I just want to encourage you to please reach out, send an email, and let's talk about what that can look like for us to work together. Have a great week, mamas. And on behalf of God, thank you for loving and playing with his kids. Bye now. Well, mamas, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me on Playfully Faithful Parenting. I'd love to keep the conversation going over on the socials. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you felt encouraged or equipped by today's show, do me a favor and leave a review. I can't wait to hear your story. Till next week, keep playing and pointing those littles to Christ.